No. Hi, everybody. We're having one of those pre-game conversations. Welcome to Star Citizen Live. I'm your host, Jared Huckabee, and we're back. We're back. Five so weeks off for the holidays. Good chance to recharge our batteries. We're back here on Twitch talking about Star Citizen. If you've never seen Star Citizen Live before, that's where we take about an hour out of the end of our week, pull some of our developers from really important work that they'd really like to get finished before they take off for the weekend, pull them over here and make them answer questions. Which is ultimately their favorite thing, and do so on video, which is also one of their favorite things, but we always appreciate when they take the time to do it. On this week's show, our first show back, we are going to be talking all about Alpha 3.18, the patch that's been in development since yay old days. How long? That's six. Yeah, I mean, since 3.17.2 went out in July. In July.
July,
yeah.
I think.
Yeah, that was our quarterly patch. That was our quarterly patch. We called it 3.17.2 because it was off the 3.17 branch. But if you look at the content in it, that was our quarterly patch for that. It just had a weird name. But yeah, for the last going on 7 months now, shades of the 3.0 beard notwithstanding, we have been in this long path towards making what is easily the most ambitious and important and foundational patch to Star Citizen since 3.0 went out. It's not even a doubt. So with that, we're going to jump right in, and let me introduce you to this week's honored guests. Immediately to my right, Star Citizen Live Game Director, Mr. Todd Pappy.
Hello.
How you doing, man?
Good. Good to see you.
Well, good to see you. We haven't done it all about one of these shows in a while.
Let alone in person.
Let alone in person. Oh gosh, we haven't done one of these in person.
Yeah.
We got a little taste of it during CitizenCon.
Yeah.
Little bit of it, but that was a high stress kind of. We didn't get a chance to enjoy it.
No.
Nobody watches this show, so we can do whatever we want. So CitizenCon was like, and then also joining us remotely from our Montreal studio in Turbulent, our Turbulent studio in Montreal, Benoit and Guillaume. Benoit, say hi.
Hi, guys.
That's Benoit, Chief Technology Officer of Turbulent. That's right. And Guillaume, our Development Director. What's your title now, Guillaume?
Director of Development. Yeah, indeed. You're good.
Director of Development.
Hey, everyone.
So we are talking all about Alpha 3.18. Guillaume, this is your first time on the live show, so before we jump into it, I do want to take like maybe a few moments and introduce you to the community. Who are you and what do you do? What does a development director do?
Absolutely.
We don't know.
Ben keeps asking, and I never dare to answer him. The development director. So essentially, I started with CIG and Turbulent when we started the kind of the game development team here in Montreal. Building that team and developing really inside Turbulent the various teams that are now forming our development operations. And then through the course of this year, I had a discussion with Aaron, and we started defining what more global role, let's say, I could take, and discussing with Benoit and Marc Baudet and Todd and Aaron, we figured that Director of Development for Star Citizen in its entirety would be kind of a good position. So I kind of dipped my toes with 3.18 and trying to manage that the release of that of that release, and now it was an interesting challenge, and I saw where I could help. So we kind of officialized it to become Director of Development for all of Star Citizen and working with the various studios we have throughout the world.
You picked the right release.
Yeah, it was very smooth, very smooth onboarding.
Yes, so it's been real smooth, real great, a testament to your work, Guillaume.
Yeah, I tried everything to help. Okay.
Yeah.
It happens. It's when you're building something that's never been built before, and you're doing it in a way that's never been used to build it. How do you estimate how long it's going to take? It's
trial and fire.
Yeah.
Interestingly enough, is coming into such a difficult release. It was quite interesting because it allowed me to see a lot of the breaking points and where we need to reinforce our production processes and our development processes. So it's kind of a, let's say the silver lining is now I got tons of idea of what we can improve, and we've already been discussing with the production team on how to fix many of the breaking points that happen.
Yeah, you make a good point. It was living through the 3.0 quagmire that got us a lot of improvements on the back end, not just to the game, but in the way that we make the game. The whole quarterly release schedule came about because of 3.0. So that's not me sitting here promising anything. It's just moments like this are great for evaluating and realigning internally and stuff like that. So we'll see what positive moments come from that. All right, so enough of the preamble. One of the biggest features, we only have Benoit for a certain amount of time. Benoit's got to take off and go back to work. So I want to get as much of the PES stuff out of the way ahead of time while we got Benoit. So Benoit, we've already done videos on what PES is and how it works, and most people have a pretty decent handle on it from a tech.
Hopefully experienced.
You drop a thing and it stays there and whatever. But let's talk about PES from a player perspective. Not everybody has had a chance to jump onto the PTU yet. Not everybody's had a chance to log into Twitch or onto YouTube and see other people who are playing it. So how has, and Todd, you can jump in here too, obviously, but how has PES changed the player experience so far in 3.18?
Ben, you want to start with it since it's your baby?
Yeah.
And other people's babies, but yeah.
Yeah. I think in terms of the player experience, the major change is really that, in 3.17, the servers recycle quite a bit, either if it's a 30,000 crash or a simple restart, right? Then the world comes back to fresh and vanilla, right? So like AI get back into their position, game world is all cleaned up. There's no more trash anywhere. And so I think the first player experience change there is that you start coming to servers that have been lived in, right? So things happen, like people stack stuff at areas, they left ships in areas you can find, and salvage element. I think salvage being in the patch has been great because it showed the potential of that feature coupled with persistence. So I think that's the number one change, is that you no longer come to a pristine world, you come to a world that's lived in. And I think that's a defining element of our MMO, right? We're slowly turning more and more into what an MMO should be. And I think persistence is the number one thing. So that's how I think the player experience has changed and will continue to change as players get more creative about what they can do.
Yeah, I would agree with everything that Ben says, and then add to it, even from a dev standpoint, we're learning, what we should do, how we should change missions, how should we create, gameplay or missions that would feed on some of the stuff that's been left around or cleaned up, or so we're doing internal looks on it, but then I'm excited to see what players will do with how they'll break the game.
The first thing is the first thing we know is that even on PTU, the engagement from people that have access currently has been great in finding ways to break the shards.
Yeah.
So that's been the part of the development cycle. I think that's been the most interesting for us anyway. Once the technology was built, was to see it run and then seeing how, now we have some zones that get hot because somebody dumped an entire C2 of boxes somewhere, and then we didn't plan for this loading mechanism to support it, right? So it's already it's already fun, right, to see what can happen when the game world actually persists.
Yeah, that first example that I noticed was, there's a lot of new racetracks in 3.18. People went out to Snake Pit and whatnot, and they saw the littered wreckage of other racers, and it instantly affected the way that people were racing, because as they were approaching a turn and they saw a bunch of crash wrecks, like, okay, maybe I'm not going to take this turn as flippantly as I might have otherwise had done so. So that lived in, it starts to inform decisions and stuff. That's a neat aspect that a weird thing that persistence, a weird way that persistence can affect the gameplay experience. Todd, you were starting to touch on it before about how PES has affected development. Mm-hmm. So, we were talking about how it's affected players and stuff, but talk to me about how it's affected design teams, props artists, anybody. It's because we've had to learn internally how to work with this.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think right now it's still so fresh and new that we were finishing up Task Force 318, and now that we're picking our head up from getting a lot of these live must fixes done, now we're starting to look at, okay, how does this change, missions? How can we create like beacons? How can we clean up the world and everything? Now, Chris has been talking about this for a while, but now some of our dev teams can actually breathe now, and we can start working towards this. So whether it be like creating bins that you can basically throw away and then that deletes items from the world, or even, if a big event happens and then ship's wreckage are there, and now you can go and salvage that. Like, I think those are some of the interesting things that will arise. But then I think it'll really change the way that we're doing missions mostly. And for props guys, they're still going to be building the props the same way. It's not going to really change our art, or I think it'll change our art when we right now a lot of the things that we do in ships and we do with art is we basically bake it in, make it look lived in. And what we'll do, I think, in the future is basically clean that out. And so you'd be delivered a fresh ship, and then you dirty it up, you make it look lived in, and just like you would do if you just moved into an apartment or a house or something.
I think there's another thing too that we're slowly discovering. I mean, you can imagine this is gonna happen, but until you have it in your hands, is that I feel like there's many. You're right on the mission side, like that's going to change a lot, because just as a player, your approach to a specific mission will be able to change, because you could, let me throw an example. You have a mission to go somewhere. You could prepare for that mission by hiding a ship in a cave nearby, and then that allows you to escape, or things like that. This is not something that would be possible before, because you most likely would lose the ship because it would get cleaned up by the vehicle manager. Whereas now you can actually leave stuff in the game world to help you in your mission, right? So whether it's supplies or whatever in preparation for it, or a PvP event, same kind of thing, right? But also I think that there's what we don't grasp just yet as far as an effect on the design teams is the fact that you get free persistence on items would allow gameplay loops that are built just by an object existing, right? So if I can, like currently, if I add an item to a player ship, it's not necessarily going to persist because it gets cleaned up, recycled, whatever. But now that it persists, you could actually like imagine gameplay loops where you attach a beacon marker on a ship and that stays with it until it's found, right? Allowing you to track the ship. And that's just free because you get persistence of all entities, and even in shards, right? So you could actually, you find a ship abandoned in the game world, but it has a tracker on it, but you don't have the tool to find it. So all of that stuff will sort of become naturally and influence the, I think, mission design, prop design and stuff, and modulate how we build the game world. Like I really see all these discoveries will show up once we actually release it to more players, and we'll realize that there are some things that we planned that would be difficult to build or would require engineering and systems to be built might just be almost done already. So I think that's going to be the effect. Ultimately, I'm hoping for it.
I think the cool thing about it is having played it a little bit is it increases kind of a density of content and the element of surprise when you go to a location to do a mission, but then you're going to stumble on something else, and then maybe there's this wreck to salvage or something, and it's really interesting because it's essentially not only free content, but it's content that grounds you in the reality of this game and kind of tells a story by itself. And it's not a story that was curated by us at all. It was a story, like you said, Jared, like a story curated by the players, crashing around the track or these type of stories. So I think it adds a layer of depth to that universe that is super interesting.
Right, so you've
racetrack corpses were terrifying.
So you've all mentioned some version of, Benoit was like, you can hide this in a cave. We talked about, things informing the racetracks, stuff like this. Guillaume talked about the density, stuff like this. But there has to be an upper limit of this stuff. So we've talked. There has to be a way to clean this stuff up.
Yeah.
There's got to be a point where the world just becomes the trash levels from Wall-E, and we've got to bring it back. So let's talk about how that works. What, if any, trash rules, garbage rules, cleanup rules exist in 318?
So we have, I don't know what Chris Bolte calls it, but it's basically like cleanup entities, and it's
the density manager.
Density manager. So thank you. But it basically regulates the density of a certain item, and it's per class, whether it be weapons or cargo or armor, so on and so forth. It's basically per class in a certain radius. So that radius could be 5 meters, that radius could be 30 meters. Like, it really depends on how many are there. And then once it hits that upper threshold, then things will start being cleaned up and removed, but it won't go past. Meaning, let's say somebody, like Ben was talking about, where somebody drops a C2 of luggage or of cargo in an area. Well, it might be that only 20 cargo boxes can be there. Well, it's going to clean up everything except for those 20 cargo boxes. And then from there, if somebody throws in another one, then it'll remove one, and then it'll just leave. And it should be removing the oldest one.
And true or false, I hear this rumor occasionally inside. Has it ever been discussed, a janitor or a garbage person profession?
True. And in fact, we had this discussion basically with we've got some Montreal programmers, so we just had that discussion about them working on it and basically cleaning up the entity class, or allowing players to clean it up. Now, it could be used for garbage, but at the same time, it could be an incinerator. It could be some other function. So it's basically, it'll be a generic entity that will clean stuff up and remove stuff from the world, but it'll allow us to use it in multiple different ways.
Well, we've got.
I heard trash hauling.
Trash hauling.
No.
I'm just imagining Luigi's
really.
vacuum cleaner going around sucking up stuff. While we have been, I want to make sure that we do some of the more technical stuff while we have been, before we leave them here. How are the servers themselves doing? I was watching the Demar Rally last week, and this thing's been going on for years. And for the very first time, they were playing in 3.17.5. But for the very first time, they had an event that was nearly 8-9 hours, and none of the servers they had 5 or 6 entirely full servers all to themselves, and not one went down the entire 8-hour period, which is awesome. Are we looking at that kind of stuff in 3.18 still? Is this a sign of things to come? What can you tell me? Was this just luck?
Well, I mean, I can tell you from my perspective, I think we're still always striving for as much stability as we possibly can, but obviously 3.17.5 shows you that these are point patches on top of 3.17. So the amount of stabilization that has gone into that, with us going live or going to wave 1, I think it was December 22nd, to now, we've increased our stability score that we track, whether that be on server or client side, and we continue to do that, and we have a certain bar that we want to hit. But I think, even now, I think that we'll need a 3.18.1 and others just to really kind of work out all the kinks. But go ahead, Ben.
Yeah. Well, I mean, there's so for Demar, there's definitely been updates in 3.17, right, that have helped in the latest patch, because there's always, like, server fixes and server improvements always take priority, right? Because 30K is the enemy, right? But we all know that servers, as they age, their FPS go down depending on how many entities they have to simulate. And so, interestingly, for the Demar Rally this year, the servers were very stable. So there's a bit of luck involved, but there's also a lot of work that has been ongoing to support these kind of events, right? That helps stability. And so I'd say it's a combination of both, right? Probably younger servers that were also involved in it. So that sort of shows, like, we always try to improve on that. Also, being in a single zone is sort of a better has sort of a better performance profile on the servers because they have less entities to load. Like if all the streaming bubbles from players are in the same area, it is sort of, there's a bit of a gain there. I'm not saying it's major, but there's a bit of a gain, so that does help. Well, so it's a combination of things.
I'm just remembering the Gates of Encourage event when I worked at Blizzard, and how putting everybody in one zone was not a good idea.
And the client's gonna say different things, right?
So one of the aspects of 318 that's relatively new, it's kind of gone under the radar, I think it's only been mentioned on Spectrum and whatnot, is the character repair tool. I know almost nothing about this, so we had a couple questions in Spectrum about it this week. So Benoit, what can you tell us about the character repair tool?
So you guys are familiar with the character reset tool, which is available for players in 317 to, it's like a panic button, basically, right? And allows you to basically reset your entire character account to be pristine, right? Based on the stuff, obviously the hard money purchases are restored. Some elements of this that are part of long-term persistence will stay, but effectively your in-game database, your inventories, your ships, your character all get destroyed and then they're rebuilt. Now, historically, that tool was needed because there was a lot of problems with the game stability on the back end side, and a lot of players would get into situations. I mean, we've seen every single case, like head attached to a mining laser, missing eyes, missing Moby glass, which has been a bug that's been plaguing us for a while. And so the character reset tool that's available for players has always been sort of the, oh shit, I need to restore this. Unfortunately, as every time you provide a tool like this, there's been performance issues linked to that tool because it has to do a lot of heavy lifting to reset your account. Like it's a lot of inventory items to move and restore. And so often in the past couple of years, we've had to stop resets in order to fix a back-end problem or performance issue related to that because too many people were resetting, for example. And so as we were looking at PES, one of the major changes in the backend is that it's a lot more transactional. And so data corruption issues, we're hoping, I'm not saying there's not going to be problems, but we're hoping that at least in its design, this kind of issues is going to be much less frequent. And we also did not want to repeat the problem of the past, which was to allow a full reset, which is too costly in terms of recreation of items and transferring of items. And so, but we still need the games in development, so we want to provide players with a way to keep playing. That was always the objective, even with the original reset, was we want to get you back to playing the game, right? One of the side effects of the original reset is also that, as everybody knows, people have been using the reset tool for other purposes. For example, mass moving of items back to a start location to consolidate their inventories, things like that. And so the backend cost of these moves is gigantic overall, and so we can't support them anymore. And so that came about. Still, we need a way to, in case an account is no longer able to play, we need a way to be able to reset it, to keep the person from playing. And we looked at all the different kinds of issues that could happen for that. And the main one being, missing items on the playing avatar. So like, if you don't have a movie glass, you don't have eyes, you don't have a head, your character can't really play the game functionally. And so we devised a new tool. So basically the character reset tool that you have now will become a character repair tool. And the main difference is that it will no longer restore or destroy your game inventories and your ships. It will only repair your playing avatar. And so the goal is really to get you back in game and playing with everything intact, right? So the repair tool should also be a lot faster because it doesn't have to do all this heavy lifting of moving stuff and recreating entities and whatever. It really needs to find your playing character wherever it is. Let's say you're stuck in a rock and you can't get out of there, and then even if you force die, you respawn at the rock. I don't know how that could happen, but I mean, I've seen worse bugs. Well, when you repair, we're gonna basically search and destroy your playing avatar, and then give you a new avatar to your starting location that's going to be brand new. Now, there's some caveats to that. Like, obviously, don't want to allow you to be able to bypass prison status and crime status when we do that. So there's a couple of things that will carry over. But we're hoping that this will be a much faster, much more enjoyable tool to keep playing. And the other side effect is that there are, now Todd's not going to like me, but I'm going to say it anyway. So there are some ship bugs that have not been fixed because you could just reset, right? And so by changing the reset into a repair that will only repair your playing character, then we want to make sure that we can prioritize fixing ship bugs where ship become unrepairable or unflyable or things like that, so that these bugs can be surfaced, and then our development director can come in and prioritize these issues because they affect players on the live systems, and we can't have the argument that, oh, we'll just get them to reset. So that's a bit of why the change is there. So that's the long story short for the character repair versus reset. Now, customer service will still have the option to do a reset, right? But those will be a bit more destructive and restore an account, a playing character to a full pristine state. So that's the gist of it. I hope I'm not forgetting parts, but yeah.
No, I know there are some other technical limitations to some of the items that people have been using reset to recover, like subscriber items and stuff that are lost. So I mean, this version that's rolling out with 3.18 is not the final solution to all that stuff.
Yeah. For subscriber items specifically, there's a lot of ongoing discussions about how to treat them more as an entitlement you can sort of restore, right? But that design is still ongoing, of course, and we'll iterate on that reset. But for now, the main objective we have with the reset tool is really to get you to keep playing the game.
Yep.
In case you're stuck.
Jazzle Newpar says that was the short story. If you spent 8 years with Benoit like I have, yes. That was the short version.
Yeah.
It's when he rubs his hands together. That's when you know you're going to be there for a while.
So, were there, this came in the chat. It's interesting. Were there any surprises that resulted from the implementation of PES? Things that we just didn't expect or anticipate, and say, "Oh, that's weird, different, and okay, maybe we'll keep that." No, not bugs, but like, you can do that too.
Well, I think, I mean, you see some of it, but like, you talk about it a lot, but then actually seeing it in action, that's the part that becomes a little bit more interesting. And I think, it's we can exploit that now, and like Ben was talking about before, which is, I think there's going to be a lot of things that we'll see, and then we're like, oh, okay, let's try this, let's try that, and it's so. I mean, I think it'll be all right. Do we want to prioritize those over existing features that we're working on, or something like that? But I think it'll fall out from this coming in, and then us learning to live with it for a little bit, and then adjusting priorities from there.
I think there's I kind of always expected to have a lot of different things happening with the PES and the new features we develop, but actually seeing them happen and seeing those little stories happening, because I remember seeing a Reddit post where there was a guy in his vulture that was AFK, and then another vulture arrived and started stripping the vulture from all its materials, and like you kind of wonder what the AFK player's face is going to be when he comes back and his vulture is actually completely stripped, almost like on 4 cinder blocks, So those are all like kind of interesting stories that we've seen happening, and that we knew they were possible, but you don't really realize you could do that before you see that Reddit post, right?
Yeah, there's been a lot of things, and remember, because it's still on just wave 1, it's still a pretty small sample size. When 3.18 goes live, we'll really start to see what people are doing this. But we've seen people make art installations their debris. Doing the typical. We knew people were going to write messages with the salvage laser. Bart was here and stuff like that. So a lot of those things were like, yeah, obviously, we've all played games ourselves. We know what we would do with it. But it is. The thing that I'm looking forward to most once 3.18 goes live, and then it's to everybody, is those surprises, is to see what we haven't anticipated.
Yeah.
Because there's going to be some. I have a feeling there's still some creativity left in the community. They're going to shock us with some.
I think we're
possible.
just seeing the tip of the iceberg already. Like, I mean, there's some great stuff going on PTU now, but I mean, I just think the surprises are going to keep coming. For me, like some of the ones we've had during development was, of course, having to adjust the game systems to the persistence. I mean, we had a pre-discussion a little bit, and Todd reminded me of this one where the character, we had a test for character reset repair, and but the thing is, we didn't clean up the previous player, because typically right now we don't need to do anything, right? The game server that has it will remove that player and it's gone. And so there's just a normal recycling that happens. But with PES, your previous guy is persisting, right? And so we need to find it to remove it. And so when we got to the first couple waves and players were using the account recopy on PTU, they would come back in game and be faced with themselves, which was, a bit uncanny and interesting, but I think that was a funny one for me. Like just them finding themselves. Hey, I did the reset while I was at this location, and then boom, they would find themselves. That's pretty cool.
Benoit, I know we're almost out of time with you. I want to make sure I get this question. You poked Todd a little bit about the ship bugs. I'm going to poke you about Wave 2. We've been on Wave 1 for what seems to be a while now, 4 weeks and stuff like this.
Yeah, 4 weeks, a month.
Is Wave 2 still? I understand that you have some hand in why we're not at Wave 2.
Well, yeah. Well, so a couple of things, right? So just so you guys know, when we decide to go to another wave, there has to be a sort of a gain, because we want to keep your attention when we're testing on the public test universe, and when we add these big waves, right, that adds a lot more players to the system. We want to make sure that we have all the changes that we wanted on the infrastructure so that we get as much data as possible for these big pushes. And there's a series of tech changes that have been necessary, that have showed up during the Christmas break, which to be honest was very beneficial, because we let servers and shards run during the break, and we discovered a lot of issues like shards growing out of size. That breaks the loading process, prevents that shard from being loaded again, and that has a lot of impact on the infrastructure that Ahmed is running in the cloud. And so basically we've been looking at these issues, and we've devised solutions for them, but we want to make sure they're in place before we hit Wave 2. So there's two of them. One is the method we use to reload a shard in the current mechanism. It was prone to break if we had hot zones. Hot zones is basically like one very specific area with a large amount of entities. So we discovered an issue with the way we were loading, and so we have a new streaming system there that will basically fetch results from the persistence database and basically send them as we go instead of buffering them, which was causing an issue. And the second one was really the second big issue is that in our original design for PES, we were shooting for one large data pipeline per game environment, right? So every game server would be submitting their messages to this very large queue, and just process that for persistence. Now now that we've seen what players do, and we've seen how the game servers are submitting their updates, there's issues with, I'll say, noisy neighbor. So one shard, one server is creating a lot of updates for something, and then that will affect another shard. And so we've seen these ripple effects go on, and so we wanted to solve that before we went to Wave 2. which it's a feature we call shard isolation, which is basically each server has its own data pipeline, and they all operate sort of independently to persist to their shard, and there's no crossover right between them. And so that feature is pretty much done now. So we're about to run the test and stuff, and then move it up to PTU so that we can see the effect, and that will open the gates for Wave 2, basically.
Okay, so you're not saying, just so that's not misconstrued, you're not saying that's today or anything, right?
No, I'm not saying that's today.
Just
Not today, but I mean, we're getting close, right?
We're getting there. Yeah,
Yeah.
we're getting close. It's a good thing. I mean, this will give us a lot more resilience too over the growth of the shards, which grow substantially larger than even the game designers had planned, which is good. I mean, that just means the feature is functional.
And those are the two specific, bugs that are stopping us from moving to Wave 2.
There's also some other gameplay side effects that we've been looking at. One of them is related to the way insurance works. So we're sort of, as far as the players are concerned, it works the same way, but the way the backend was implementing restoring a ship was sort of reliant on the previous technology's way of keeping ships that are destroyed, which we no longer do that. When a ship is destroyed, we have to clean it up. And so there's a new insurance system, which is a good news because that's also future proof. But it's the same functionality for you guys, works the same way.
Okay.
And then on the game side, we're just going through and fixing stuff still and making sure that, when we go Wave 2, Wave 3, it's as solid as possible. So, but that's what we're doing from our
But we do
standpoint.
need the Wave 2. Like the Wave 2 influx of people is very important for us to validate that those changes work. So yeah, the Wave 2 is totally still a thing.
Just not today.
Just not today.
The chat was like, not today. So, and for those who want Wave 2 to come faster, you can address your letters to Benoit Beauséjour, 888 Saint Laurent, Montreal, Quebec.
I have a prop for this, right? There you go.
For those who don't read French, it's complaints departments.
So obviously we've been talking about this, and Benoit, I'm pretty sure we're at your time limit. Do you have to go now?
I have a couple more minutes.
Okay.
Yeah.
So let's. Obviously, we joked at the beginning here. Someone was like, "Is this game live? If this show live?" I mean, yes. If it wasn't live, my intro would have been way more better than it was. We've been working on 318 for a while now. The 318 that's on the horizon. I'm not going to say we're about to get the 318, but that will be the next release whenever we get there. Is not the same 318 that we would have gotten if we released it in September. The extra time has allowed us to add more things into the patch over time.
Anything that was in the December, that would have been in the December release is what is in the 318 now. Now, obviously, there's other bug fixes and stability stuff that goes in, but as of basically end of December, there's no new feature work or anything like that. But obviously, if you're talking about from like the September aspect, then yes, everything else just keeps on going into the 318. So it is a much bigger patch than what it would normally be. And then obviously, really the only kind of new tech development stuff is the stuff that Benoit was just talking about, just to make sure that PS functions the way that we need it to function.
So let's talk.
Also, always a bunch of server improvements, right? That always go in because
yeah,
it's a constant work. Right?
Yeah,
constant work.
I mean, we always hotfix and try to. Usually, the way it goes is, like Ben said, the first thing that comes in and is fixed is server crashes, because that affects everybody, and then from there it's client stability and client crashes that are fixed, and then from there it's a lot of the gameplay features.
Yeah, it's not only fixes, but there's also like entire pieces of content, like the racetracks were actually developed after
September.
What 318 should have, when 318 should have been released, right?
Yeah.
So that was another gigantic thing that was added.
Well,
just
that was
we had more time.
Right, but that was meant for the December release. Whatever name number it was, but the idea was that yes, we were aiming for that in that quarter.
So let's talk a little bit about. Let's start. We've spent a lot of time on the tech. Obviously, the tech is a huge part of this patch. But I do want, before we run out of time here, I want to start talking about some of the bigger features. Let's talk about racing, since we brought it up. Starting with the snake pit, expanding into these 6 new tracks that are coming in 3.18. There's some new Arena Commander stuff we're going to be talking about on Inside Star Citizen next week, so we won't touch it there. We'll let that team talk about it there. But there seems to be, at least from the outside looking in, kind of a renewed focus on racing. Is this just an incorrect? Is this an incorrect perception, or was there an initiative here?
Yeah, but I think the initiative was on multiple different facets. So whether it be Arena Commander or even in Persistent Universe. So whether that be Tony or myself, like we all have different ideas of what it needed to be. And then Tony's team worked on what was considered basically the mission behind it. And then the content teams worked on developing the actual racetracks. So some of that in Montreal, some of that in Germany and the UK. And then from there, it was things that we kind of considered low-hanging fruit and things that were interesting for the content developers to work on. And then there's the AC side, which I think you'll delve more into. But again, there was some shared technology that we wanted to take a look at in the future, and we have a lot of similarities as far as the way that we want to do things, but. Then I think also, Sean and Duncan and that team also want to be able to make sure that they take stuff from the PU and be able to use it in other stuff as well.
Should try to run a snake pit with a reclaimer, guys.
That was one of the first videos, actually. One of the first things Nemanja did was run snake pit with the reclaimer. He did all right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. He's a much better player
drifted
than me.
real hard.
So yeah. So there's a fair amount of racing stuff. Also with the time trials stuff that MFT's been working on, and stuff that actually makes those racetracks more than just here's an area. Now there's the actual things that mark the times and stuff.
Yeah, it's a mission. But again, for this, like we'll take what the initial aspect was and then be able to grow it. Like it's still missing some features that I would be looking for, whether that be multiple laps or being able to have rolling starts versus only starting from an area. So like there's some fundamental things that we still want, that we can just do shared development between Arena Commander and ourselves.
Yes, isn't Thorne. I have to stop looking into his eyes. It gets distracting. I agree. So we've been talking about Salvage for, it seems like a long time, but I have to remind myself that Salvage is actually coming into game with this patch. From my perspective, we've been talking about it for a while. How is it? Are we happy with where it's at?
Yeah.
Is it coming along well?
I mean, I think our team is extremely happy with where it's at. Especially for the first installation. Like I'm very proud of what they've been able to do, and I think they're excited about it as well, and seeing the reaction that players are getting, and then also seeing some of the tactics that they're building. Like if they want to go take out an Idris, what kind of ships do they need, and then how much can how many vultures do they need versus how many reclaimers do they need, and the thought process behind all right, how am I going to earn as much money per hour by doing this, and then some of the multi-crew gameplay that's also been coming out of that, whether it be the turrets or in the back and how they operate, pulling out the cargo boxes and everything.
And I imagine that like mining before it will continue to iterate after its first release and continue to be improved on.
Yeah.
And stuff like that. So, all right. So I'm going to jump into
It looks right. I mean, Salvage, to be honest, is really, really... I think combining PES with Salvage is a super big win, because the opportunities are endless at this point, right? Like, abandon the ship, and then somebody else just finds it, and it's like, interesting.
Or even some of the vent stuff, like because the ship should stay there, and or any sort of battles that happens, those ships should be there, and then you can just come along and make some money.
I mean, for me also, even like you're talking about battles, but we could even use player battles to populate piece of the world where it's like, oh, we want space debris from a battle. Well, let's just make one. Let's make a battle, and then that's it.
Yeah.
You got your debris. I mean, this is just like all these opportunities will start to gel really well. I think adding game loops like Salvage is just one of the many things that will jive with this really well.
So I'm pretty sure it was while we were on break, while I was on break from the show, there was a Spectrum post where they introduced a panel on the Vulture and the Reclaimer where you could basically manufacture a multi-tool and attachments and stuff from the raw salvaged material that you've been gathering. A lot of folks heralded it as like the first kind of crafting in Star Citizen. Is that an accurate description? Did we just dip our toe into crafting there?
It is. I mean, it is. But again, Chris has been talking about it for quite a while, and for our team, it was just, all right. We've got some sort of resource, and then we can spawn different items. So it is foundational. It is stuff that we want to build on. It's just there's one or two other priorities that we need to knock out first, and then we will be moving on to that in the future.
More crafting stuff. 318 also includes the cargo refactor. The first iteration of the cargo refactor, with physicalized cargo and your ability to finally move cargo from one ship to another ship. The cargo persisting after death. That came along with soft death.
Yeah.
And stuff like this. How's this changed the experience in 318?
I think a lot. I mean, it makes piracy a lot more interesting because before you would go and blow up a ship, and then maybe you would have some cargo and inject it at what we consider 1/8 SEU, and then now you can actually go there and it should be 1-to-1, and then also we've always wanted ways to not have the ship completely, blow up when you're taking it down. So obviously with soft death, this allows you to basically take it down enough, and then be able to still, have some of your items survive or some of that cargo survive. So that's I think some of the main things that it's been focusing towards.
That's come along with some new challenges, though, because now the soft death ships can land on the ground upside down and pin players inside the cockpit.
There's some interesting gameplay that happens, from there. Obviously, we'll still need to look at ways of freeing yourself and all of that, but in some cases, this is what would happen in real life, and we will be working on like ship tractor beams and those types of things. So then you could have somebody, pull you out and flip you over.
And to me, soft death is it unlocks so many possibilities, because it essentially takes what used to be the finality of a gameplay loop, which ship blows up, nothing else happens, and then you move on to something else, and opens up new options, new gameplay. It's the start of a new gameplay loop of trying to either board the ship or get the cargo. So it was so fun to see the players discovering gameplay around that feature.
Yeah.
New stories, man.
And
it's all player stories, man. All about the player stories.
Yeah. And that one also wasn't ready for September, but obviously it was ready for December. So.
Hell yeah. That's what I'm talking about. I'm gonna have to go, Jared. This is my time up. I hope you guys have a great end of day.
Have a happy birthday, Benoit.
Oh, that's right. It's
Benoit's birthday.
Happy birthday, Benoit.
Yes. I'm 23 years old. It feels great.
I know.
First job in the industry.
That's what I tell people. I'm only 23. This is game dev.
Yeah.
This is what game dev
exactly.
does.
That's right. That's exactly right.
Well, happy birthday, man.
Yep.
Thank
Take
you,
care,
guys.
buddy.
Thank you guys. Later.
See you, Benoit.
I want to follow up on something you mentioned. The physicalized cargo and stuff, and it's great for piracy. We've had a number of features lately that are that can be presented as great for piracy and stuff like this. Currently in the game, service beacons tend to be used to trap people, to lure people and trap people into traps. I don't have any specs. I don't have any stats on this, but it seems like you're just as often to find a service beacon be a trap as you are to actually it being somebody, actually needing help. With the advent of physicalized cargo and stuff like this, and now does it make using service beacons for criminal activity even more attractive?
Maybe, but I mean, I think the criminals are going to do what they want to do, and so then the question is, are you a good Samaritan? Are you willing to go out there and answer this? But we always want to create opportunities for players, and then how they decide to use them, and it's really going to be up to them how we meld them. Obviously, in the future for service beacons, we do want to have like star ratings or those types of things, so you can start seeing, okay, somebody's got like a 2 on the
right. That was one of the oldest things. Chris was talking about that back in like 2013, 2014.
Yeah.
The ability to rate a mission, player mission givers, and have like a Yelp score.
Correct.
For people.
So that's still in the plan. It's just a little bit lower priority on that team.
We're talking about reputations. We were talking about player reputations, but there are the in-game reputations. Do those now persist with
They
persistence and stuff like that? So when you do a character repair stuff, you're not going to lose your.
They should.
Probably should have asked that when Benoit was still here.
I mean, it's basically we don't try to wipe, very often on the, for the player stats or the wallet or anything like that. We want to make sure that the players start reaching some of what we consider like mid-game, in-game, aspects. So like all of that stuff should act the way it was before.
Were there also changes to the armor and shields system?
Well, it was more that there were changes to basically the ballistics and the lasers and or energy weapons and how those work with the armors and shields. So it's that the ballistics will be able to pass through the shields. There is some damage that's sloughed off from there, and then it's supposed to be that the ballistics basically chew through the armor quicker. So we've done some tuning, and then we will do some little bit more rebalance associated with that. We're not to the final stage where we're going to have the physicalized damage, which was the end goal for this, and making sure that the armor feels the way that the armor should. But this is a step in the direction.
The first thing that pops into my head when you say that right now is that, again, I don't have stats or data, and I'm just talking about an empirical kind of feeling. It feels like most of the AI out there use ballistics. Is that going to make fighting the AI a lot more difficult?
Probably. I mean, we noticed that also, with PES, we're actually having better server frame rate as well. So, and then we also did some accuracy adjustments on the AI. So they might be tuned up a little bit.
So between the improved server frame rate, the improved ballistics.
There might be some balancing and tuning that will happen, in basically wave 2, wave 3, wave 4. But basically, there should be some improved gameplay associated with them.
Okay. And there's a change to bed logout in 3.18. I don't actually know what that's about. But it came up a couple times in chat.
Yes, there's a change to it, but again, the main thing was that when we were in Evocati, like we were starting to see some of these issues, and basically, like Ben was saying, there were different things that became very evident that we needed to adjust and fix. So we did some changes to bed logout, and then the goal is to, again, go back to the way it used to be. But right now, in order for us to get out in time, we needed to be able to get out, not necessarily on time, but for us to get out and get done with this, we needed to be able to kind of strip down and not develop so many features at once. So.
Send your letters to Todd Pappy, care of 6 Manchester Goods Yard Street. I'm remembering addresses today. Yeah. It's interesting. I'm usually bad with addresses. before we let you go, one of the big things that that brings people back, it helps our concurrency numbers, helps bring people together, are our dynamic events, the Jump Town, the Nine Tails, Xenothreat stuff. Do we know yet how PES is going to affect or change those events?
Well, I think we know that some of the stuff that, let's say there's a big battle with Xenothreat, those wrecks should persist and they should be there. So it'll allow people to go and clean up at that battle afterwards. Or, I think Luke was mentioning something where there was some frame rate and some possible stalls that happened when somebody crashed a reclaimer right next to Jump Town, and therefore, that's when the cleanup should have happened, and so on and so forth. So, I think there's going to be some hiccups, but I think the main thing should be that something happened here, and then it's up to you to either figure out, oh, I was part of that battle, or oh, they had a battle here, and there's basically some remnants of it.
Right, and Xenothreat, it goes on for a while,
for
multiple
3
stages. So
Yeah.
now wreckage and stuff may persist through the phases.
Well,
possibly?
I think it basically the Starfarer stuff gets cleaned up after phase 1, so it will be really like the Idris at the end. Like if that gets destroyed, then you should have that destroyed Idris out there.
Those are some of those things I look forward to kind of discovering. Is we can anticipate and we can project, but you can't ever be correct with these things. All right, so we're just out of time. I know this show is about Alpha 318 and stuff, but Alpha 318 with it's got the PES, but we know PES is moving on towards server meshing and stuff, and we'll be covering more of that journey in just a couple weeks on ISC. But as far as the game feature stuff, the cargo, salvage, racing, stuff like that, anything you can tell us about the next year for that stuff? I'm not saying dates or whatnot, just where we want to go with these features.
So with cargo, obviously the first thing that we need to do is we need to be able to have different cargo sizes. So first and foremost, that's needed for like the Hull C and other major ships is basically making sure that when we put stuff in the cargo bay or on ships that it puts the right cargo on there. So in this case, 32 SCU for like the Hull C. So that's one of the first things, and then from there it would be some of the smaller cargo. So whether it be the 1/8 SCU fitting on the cargo grid as well. So there's those aspects that we'll be working towards cargo, and then there's other modifiers on top of that, whether that be volatile or frozen or time, so on and so forth. So there's those elements that we can make them feel a lot more interesting. Like you got to go take 40 hearts over to somebody, and you got a certain period of time and box is frozen, and you got to keep it under a certain temperature, so on and so forth. So then for salvage, there's obviously the hull scraping, but then there's the munching aspect and getting that working, and so that's one of the main things that the EUP will be moving on to very, very soon, is getting that munching aspect working. And then for racing, the way that we're trying to work through this is that we'll introduce a mission, and what we would consider that is kind of a mission verb that basically our content teams can exploit. And then from there, it will be us taking things and making events out of them, or like so, and then it's also from a content side, being able to create new tracks and everything else, because this is something that Louis and I are looking at from a high-level perspective is, how do tracks work in Stanton? How do tracks work in Pyro, Nix, so on and so forth? So, illegal tracks or street racing, and how does that feel, compared to what would be, the Murray Cup, side. So, and how do you build reputation with those events and all of that? So, and how do we unlock? And then it's also how many per location. So.
Cool. Any hope for the Grimex racetrack?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
It's on the docket. It's something that the guys want to build. So.
All right. last question. This is from the backers. Guillaume, you're still with us, right?
Yeah, for
Hey,
sure.
318 is the question said almost out the door. 318 is on its way. It's been 6+ months of trial and tribulation. The question is, would you do it again?
In a second.
I would do it again. I would do it differently in some cases.
It's the same for me.
So
There's a few decisions we would have maybe changed. Yeah.
I think, because Guillaume didn't go through 3.0, like 3.0 was a slog, and but what came out at the end of it, I think, was something special. So, and obviously we built on that, since then. So I think, again, with this is a slog, but what we've talked about in the beginning, we've learned a lot of things of, oh no, we shouldn't have done that, or oh, we should change this, or no, we did this really, really well. So there'll be production changes, development changes, on this. But I think for this, it's just it's a means to an end. Whether 3.0, it's not necessarily like a birth, but if 3.0 was a little bit of teenage years, early teenage years. This is later teenage years. We're going through this growing process and going through these changes. So it's just, how do we learn and how do we deal with it?
And 4.0 is where we get drunk.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, Gil.
I can definitely. I wasn't there for 3.0, but for 3.18, I can say I've been in difficult situation and shipped difficult AAA games and whatnot, and I can say that the amount of complexity this release demonstrated and the amount of effort that the team had to put through was one of the more difficult ones I've seen in my career. So I know it's been a while and the players are all waiting patiently, but the silver lining in all this is that it's going to be worth it. Everything we're seeing from the players who are actually interacting with 3.18, it unlocks a whole lot new of gameplay situation, and I think I sincerely believe that in the future, in 3, 4, 5 years from now, we're going to see the release of 3.18 as an inflection point in Star Citizen's reality and what it delivered to the players. So it's been very difficult, and we would 100% do some things differently, and we're actually right now looking at server meshing and figuring out how we're changing some things and making sure that some of the errors from the past are not happening. So we're actually taking this into account, but it's definitely worth it.
All right. Well, Guillaume, Todd, thank you so much for hanging out for an hour and sitting in the hot seats and answering questions about this patch that we all, I think, really, really want to get out the door.
Yeah.
Just there were a lot of the folks on ISE comments yesterday were, why are they talking about 3.19 when 3.18's not out? And I'm like, I did 6 months of 3.18. You want 3 more? Like, it's like, it's because 3.19 is still under development. It's still being developed and stuff. So we're going to continue that story this quarter. Speaking of which, we mentioned it earlier. Next week's ISC, it's an episode dedicated entirely to the Arena Commander feature team and their upcoming work, bringing Arena Commander back from the dead, as it were. That's my words, not anybody else's. For 3.19, lots of new fixes and improvements and additions coming their way, so you want to check that out next week on Inside Star Citizen. And yeah, for Todd and Guillaume, I'm Jared. Thank you so much for hanging out with us. Remember to keep an eye on the robertspaceindustries.com website and socials for details on when 3.18 does move to PTU Wave 2 and its eventual live release. Please make it somewhat soon. That's it.
Soon.
No,
It's coming soon.
no. I don't say that word. I got crap in the comments yesterday for saying that Lorville's moving fast. I mean, it is. I mean, we said it was Journey to 4.0. It's moving really good. You can't win. Can't win. I love you. All right. Talk to you later, everybody. See ya.
See you, everyone.